My son pointed to my bedroom door and said, "Pack your things, Dad. We need your room for the baby," while his friends whispered and laughed. But when I opened the hidden safe and showed them the house, the celebration stopped. His pride evaporated. The moment it happened, I was sitting on the edge of my bed, tying the same worn lace on the same old shoe, when the door swung open without a knock. If you're seeing this right now, tell me where you're watching from, because every house has a heartbeat, and mine skipped one that second. My son walked in like he owned the rhythm. He didn't look around to see if I was decent. He didn't ask if he could come in. He just pointed, 2 fingers like a judge, straight at the door and then at the bed. "Pack your things, Dad," he said, loud enough for the hallway to hear. "We need your room for the baby." Behind him, a cluster of his friends hovered, leaning on each other's shoulders, thin smiles already forming, ready to laugh at whatever came next. I could smell the faint sweetness of the cake they'd been cutting for his quiet little "we're having a baby" celebration out in the lounge. I could hear the playlist still playing on low, the same cheerful song looping as if nothing could go wrong. It went wrong the moment he said those words. I did not jump up. I didn't shout. I didn't ask him to repeat himself because I heard him clearly the first time. I looked at the carpet fibers near my shoe and noticed how the light from the window made a little stripe across the floorboards. I noticed my late wife's shawl folded on the chair, the one I never moved, and then I lifted my eyes to my son. Ethan, the child I raised with both hands, after grief had taken the third. He stood there with his shoulders wide and his chin too high, like he thought distance from the ground would make him right. His wife, Lena, drifted into view from behind him, one hand at her stomach, not showing yet, her smile thin, practiced. "It's only logical," she said. "You don't need so much space. The baby does." The boys in the hall tried to hold their laughter back, but one of them failed and coughed it into his fist. Another murmured, "Savage," as if cruelty were witty. I felt something move inside me, memory, pride, maybe both. It wasn't anger, not yet. I straightened my back slowly, the old wood of the bed frame creaking in sympathy. "When?" I asked. My voice didn't shake. It was flat, thin as a blade. "When do you need me packed?" Ethan took the question for surrender. He relaxed a little, not enough to be kind, just enough to be careless. "This weekend," he said. "We'll get movers to shift your stuff into the study. It's small, but you'll be fine. Besides, you're barely in here." He gestured in a lazy circle at my room, like it was an empty spare. He didn't see the frame photograph beside the lamp, the one where a younger him had cake on. His nose and his mother bent over laughing, flower on her cheek. He didn't see the dings in the wardrobe door where we once marked his height, each notch a little victory. He only saw square footage he could claim. I watched him watch my things, and I heard a small voice in my head say, "He planned this. Not today, maybe not fully, but he has been rehearsing it in his mind long enough to say it without flinching." I glanced at the hallway crowd. Boys I had fed at my table when they were 13, 14. I remembered pulling extra chairs for them, remembered their big eyes when my wife brought out a second pan of baked rice because the first was gone too fast. They couldn't meet my eyes now. One looked at his phone. Another pretended to be interested in the hallway mirror. Their whispers were a soft buzz, like a mosquito you can't swat. "Ethan," I said, and I used the name the way you use a small hammer on a thin nail. Measured taps. Not to break anything, only to build. "You came into my room. You brought an audience. You told me to pack my things. Why today?" He rolled his shoulders. "Because we just decided on it," he said, like he was explaining the results of a fair vote. "We were talking about the nursery, Dad. The baby deserves the best room, the biggest one. The sun comes in from here in the morning. It's healthier. He glanced back at Lena. "What makes sense?" Lena pressed her lips together in a little polite smile and added, "We thought you'd be happy to help." For the baby, the word help pressed against my chest. I had helped my whole life. I helped when I sold the car to pay for his engineering degree that he later changed to marketing without telling me. I helped when he came home with a broken heart and a broken scooter. I helped after I buried his mother when he was 18 and thought keeping his room messy would keep her scent in the house. I helped by keeping the mortgage payments always on time, by fixing leaks with my own hands, by boiling milk at 2 a.m. when he was a toddler with a fever and the clinic was closed. Help had built these walls. Help had painted this ceiling. Help had paid for this bed. "Does it make sense to humiliate me?" I asked, the same flat tone. Because I see people behind you. Ethan shrugged as if their presence was a coincidence. They're family too, he said too quickly. They're like brothers. They're just here to celebrate. I mean, you're part of it, obviously, but this is our decision, our home, our rules. Our home. I turned that phrase over like a coin in my palm. It felt stolen. One of the friends, the tallest, the one with the chain around his neck, muttered to Ethan, "Man, just keep it moving." He didn't think I heard. I heard. I stood, careful not to scrape the floor with the chair's leg, and walked to the window. Outside, the bougainvillea leaned over the fence, all bright pink and stubborn. My wife had planted it the first winter we moved in. It had been just a stick then. She watered it for months, even when I told her it might not take. She only smiled and said, "Some things bloom when you don't stare at them." She was right. It had bloomed into a blessing. It had climbed the wall, reached for the sun, and stayed. I turned back to my son. The room smelled faintly of soap and old paper. The playlist in the lounge skipped to a slower song. "You want me out of this room," I said, making each word its own small step. "You want me to move into the study. You think it's fair." Ethan nodded. "Yes, it is. We need you to cooperate, Dad. Don't make it hard." He didn't mean please. He meant obey. He had convinced himself there was kindness in it. He looked past me at the wardrobe, already measuring. I could see it. The crib here, the dresser there. A plan that moved me like furniture, not like a man. "Are you asking me," I said, "or telling me?" He hesitated, the first crack in the glass. Tiny, but I saw it. He glanced at Lena. She lifted her chin slightly, a cue. "We're telling you," he said, and tried to sound soft. "Because it's best for the baby." The friends in the hall had stopped smirking now, the air tighter, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Someone's phone buzzed. No one checked it. The word telling hung there, heavy. I could have told him then to get out. I could have asked him to bring the paperwork where he had the right to command me like that. But there's a kind of silence a father learns to use. Not angry, not frightened. Something colder and more precise. I let it sit between us like a table that had not been built yet. "I see," I said. And then I did something small that meant everything. I sat down again. Not because I was tired, because I wanted him to see the difference between standing over me and standing with me. He didn't. He took my sitting as surrender and stepped into the room fully, pointing at the corner where my chair was. "We could put the crib there," he told Lena, as if I'd turned to fog. "The light is perfect in the morning, and the dresser against that wall. Ethan." I used his name again, even quieter. He kept talking, arranging my room like a diagram. "And the changing table can go here. We'll repaint. This color is too dull. We can make it green. Fresh." The friend with the chain snorted a laugh he couldn't help. He was enjoying the show. I looked at him just once. He looked down at his shoes as if they were suddenly urgent. Lena played with the ring on her finger and smiled like a hostess in a showroom. "We'll make it cozy," she said. "It will be beautiful." There was something almost kind in her eyes, but it wasn't kindness for me. It was kindness for the idea of the future she wanted. If I had met her at a different time, I might have liked her. She was careful, trying to be polite while standing on my foot. I let them speak. I let the sentences stack up, fragile as cards, one on top of another. My eyes drifted, not by accident, to the old wardrobe. The grain of the wood ran like a river from the top to the bottom. A soft, familiar line. Behind it, the safe. Not obvious, not stupidly hidden. Cleverly placed, buried inside a compartment I had built with my own hands after your mother died. I wanted to tell him. After I realized grief makes people both tender and greedy. Tender for what they lost. Greedy for what they think they deserve next. I learned to protect the roof over our heads the same way I learned to make a perfect pot of tea. Slowly, attentively, without a witness. "You're very sure of yourself," I said, not a question. "It's a baby, Dad," Ethan said, as if the word itself were a weapon that ended arguments. "You were a father. You should understand." I did. I understood more than he knew. I understood what it costs to be a father, how you give, and then, if you are lucky, you get a hand to hold in return. If you are unlucky, you get a finger pointing to the door. The laughter in the hallway faded. One of the boys shifted his weight and the floorboard sighed. I breathed in and let my shoulders relax. "Where do you want me to put the shawl?" I asked, nodding at his mother's folded wool on the chair. He flinched. He hadn't noticed it there until I said it. His eyes softened for half a second and then hardened back into their new shape. "We'll store it carefully," he said. "In a box. You can still have it." My jaw moved once. I wondered if he knew that shawl still held a faint trace of lavender oil. I wondered if he knew who had rubbed that oil into her palms every winter because her hands hurt from sewing dresses for other people's weddings. "We'll do this on Saturday," he went on, regaining his rhythm. "I'll get Ollie and Sajid to help. They'll move your stuff. It won't take long. We already cleared some space in the study." He tossed the words we already like crumbs on the table. He had planned it. I imagined them in the study earlier, shoving my books and old files against a wall, making a corner for me, like you make a corner for a broom. Space is not kindness if it comes with shame. I stood again, slowly, the way you stand when you know how heavy you are and how steady the ground is. Ethan took a half step back. He smiled to cover it. "Don't be upset," he said. "We're doing the right thing." Upset. He wanted to shrink me into a mood. I shook my head once. "No," I said. "Not upset." It was the truth. The thing in me settling was not anger. It was the weight of a decision. I walked past him and stopped at the doorway where his friends stood. They parted quickly, like a tide peeling away from rock. I looked at each face. I recognized the boys they had been, the ones who used to call me uncle and fight over the last mango slice. Now they nodded at me like I was security. They didn't want to provoke. I turned back into the room and let my hand rest on the wardrobe door, just for a second. The wood felt warm. "Ethan," I said one more time, "names matter. You say a name and you call the person back into themselves, even if just for a breath. If I move to the study, where will you put your pride?" He frowned. "What does that mean?" I smiled a little, not unkindly, not kindly, just a sliver of something he could not read. "It means," I said, "be careful what you rearrange." He looked helplessly at Lena. She tried a different tactic, her voice softer, her eyes wider. "Dad," she said, testing the name on her tongue for the first time in weeks, "we're scared. We don't know anything about babies. We're doing our best. We just want to make a safe place for our child. The best place." I nodded. "I understand wanting the best place," I said, and I did. And I also understood that the best place is made by love and respect, not by taking what isn't yours and calling it logic. "Then you agree?" Ethan said, fast, eager to trap yes in his fist. "You'll pack?" I looked at my bed, at the small lamp that still gave a warm circle of light at night, where I read the same old book with the broken spine, at the notch on the wardrobe from the year he shot up 4 inches, and we laughed because his trousers turned into jokes, at the shawl, soft as breath. I looked at my son. "I will help make the baby safe," I said, "but I will not be told to pack by a crowd." He opened his mouth to argue. I lifted a hand and he stopped. The boys shifted again, their shoes whispering on the hall tile. The cake in the lounge was probably drying at the edges. The playlist had fallen silent. The house listened with us. "Clear the hallway," I said. No anger, no volume, just a line. "This is my room. You do not bring an audience into a man's room and make announcements. You come alone. You speak privately. You speak with respect. If you can't do that, then you can't speak to me at all." Ethan's jaw worked, stubborn. He looked at his friends. He didn't want to lose face. He didn't want to dismiss them and then climb back up the pride he had set on display. One friend coughed into his fist again, not laughing this time, just uncomfortable. Lena touched Ethan's elbow. "Maybe we should give you both a minute," she said. She had enough sense to be embarrassed by the scene. Ethan exhaled through his nose. "Fine," he said to them, as if he was in charge even of their footsteps. "We'll be in the lounge, 5 minutes." They filed away, not looking at me. The chain boy nodded once, almost an apology, and then vanished. When we were alone, the air felt clearer. The house settled back into itself. I closed the door quietly and faced my son. He stared at me with a hard face that didn't fit him. It looked like a mask he had borrowed. "You didn't have to make it dramatic," he said. "You did that," I answered, "when you brought 5 people to clap for your decision." He pushed a hand through his hair and laughed once without humor. "Dad, you're taking this the wrong way." "No," I said. "I'm taking it exactly the way you served it." He rolled his eyes. "Can we just be practical? We're running out of space. The study is enough for you. You don't have a lot of needs." The sentence dangled there, rude and small. He wanted to stuff me into a corner and then tell himself he had done his duty. I walked to the nightstand and picked up the photograph. I held it so he could see and kept my eyes on him. "Do you remember this?" I asked. He looked. He softened for a breath, the little boy in him blinking in surprise. "Mom's laugh," he murmured. "She always laughed like she didn't care if anyone heard." "She wanted everyone to hear," I said, "because joy was meant to be shared." He closed his mouth, eyes on the photo. "We're trying to build joy," he said after a moment, "for our baby. Build it with respect," I said, "or it won't stand." He looked away, out the window, at the bougainvillea blazing in the afternoon light. "So, what?" he said. "You're going to refuse? You're going to make this hard, over a room?" I set the photograph back carefully. "It's not a room," I said. "It's a line." He sighed, impatient now. "Dad, this is exhausting. You always turn everything into a lesson." I let that pass. Sometimes a lesson is the only thing worth leaving on the table. I stepped toward the wardrobe and paused. Not yet. Not out of anger, not like a shout. Timing matters in a house like this. Patience is a muscle men forget they have until they need to lift something heavy. "Here's what will happen," I said, meeting his eyes, keeping my voice steady. "You will go back to your celebration. You will thank your friends for coming. You will tell them, I am not a prop for your decisions. Then you will come back, alone, and we will talk. We will talk like men, not like performers. And then we will decide what is best for the baby." He stared at me, incredulity twitching at the corner of his mouth. "You're giving me instructions in my own house?" he said, each word laced with the pride he polished in the hallway. My face didn't move. "In my room," I said, "and we are not done with the word house yet." He held my gaze for a long time, trying to push me back with his eyes. He failed. He looked away first. He always did when he was small and wrong. "5 minutes," he said finally, his voice low. "I'll be back." He opened the door and stepped out. The hallway swallowed him. The music in the lounge clicked back on. Laughter rose, hollow. I stood very still and listened to the house breathe. Then, very slowly, I slid my hand along the warm grain of the wardrobe and felt the shape of what would come next settle into place, cool and certain, like a key against the skin. 5 minutes is a short time when you're young and in a hurry, but an old house measures it differently. While the lounge tried to be cheerful again, I stood alone in my room and listened to the walls. The music stuttered, the laughter came in bursts like a faulty tap, and every now and then someone said my name too loudly, as if the volume could make me smaller. I sat on the bed and let my hand fall across the shawl. The wool remembered her warmth even when I could not. On the wardrobe door, the tiny nicks lined up like a private calendar, his growing bones, our growing life. I could almost hear my wife's voice, low and amused. "Don't stare at the plant, water it and walk away." I had watered this family until the ground beneath us was dark and rich. I had walked away from my own dreams again and again, so that his could have room. The house knew that. The floorboards knew. The wardrobe knew. Whether Ethan knew it was the question that sat between us now, like a cold plate no one wanted to touch. I slipped into the study while he was gone. The door stuck a little. It always did in humidity. They had cleared it already, like I suspected. A narrow bed pressed into the corner, my books stacked like bricks without order, a lamp tilted to one side as if it had been scolded. A box had my name written in black marker, the letters crooked and hurried. I opened it and found a tangle of the quiet things that hold a life together. Screws in a film canister, a tin with buttons from my wife's sewing kit, an envelope of photographs that had lost their order and were now strangers in a pile. On top lay a small paperweight made of glass with a bubble trapped in the center. We bought it in a market years ago because she liked how the bubble never moved, even when you turned it. Some promises should be like that, she'd said. In the corner, someone had leaned a framed certificate, my 30 years of service at the factory, against the wall upside down. I turned it right side up out of habit and looked at my name, printed neat and final, as if it meant anything to anyone but me. It wasn't the size that hurt. The study could have been a palace if it had come with respect. It was the way they had pushed my life into a corner, told themselves it was efficient, and called that love. I took a breath, slow and deep, and let it go longer. The anger that flickered in me had a tired face. It had been here before, once when Ethan slammed a door as a teenager and called me old-fashioned because I asked him to come home before midnight. Once when a neighbor said my wife's laugh was too loud for a woman, and I smiled and said nothing, because my wife did not need my defense to be correct. The anger passed. What settled was older, cleaner. A decision can be quiet and still be a storm. When I stepped back into my room, I checked the wardrobe without opening it. My fingers found the seam on the inner panel, the slight give where wood met wood a little too perfectly. After she died, I built the compartment with patience I didn't know I had. The safe itself was plain, heavy, honest. The code numbers were the dates that built our house. The day we signed the first loan papers, the day Ethan was born, the day we finally burned the last mortgage bill in the courtyard and danced in ashes. I had put the deed there not because I suspected my own child, but because the world is a place where papers speak louder than love, and I wanted our love to have a voice if it needed one. I straightened the shawl on the chair, wiped a speck from the lamp with my thumb, and then the door opened. He came in alone like I had asked, but he brought his pride with him like a second person. He closed the door halfway, as if he wanted a quick escape. 5 minutes, he said, looking at his watch like time belonged to him too. I told them we'd be quick. I nodded at the chair. He didn't sit. He stood near the corner where he had wanted to put the crib, arms folded, chin lifted. There was a tremor at the edges of his eyes he tried to smooth with a breath. He was nervous, and the nervousness made him hard. I could see the boy who used to grip my hand in crowds when fireworks cracked the sky. I could also see the man who had practiced saying, "Our home," in the mirror. Both were standing there, and they were not friends with each other. "You wanted to talk like men," he said. "So talk." I let the rudeness pass again. Something in me decided not to collect his small debts. "You're going to be a father," I said, "so I'll talk to you like one." He shifted his weight. "Don't start with a lecture." "No lecture," I said. "A question. Why this room?" He blinked him. He'd expected defense, not inquiry. "Because it's the biggest, it's got the best light, and it's closest to the bathroom," he rattled off. "It makes sense." "It makes sense," I repeated, tasting the words. "Tell me something. Would the baby be unsafe in your room?" He frowned. "What?" "It's a room," I said. 4 walls, a door, a window. If you are there with love, the baby will be safe. If you are there without love, the biggest room will not be enough. So, I'm asking, why this room? His mouth opened and closed once. He didn't have the real answer ready, the one that starts with, "Because we wanted to prove we decide now." He said instead, "The light is better, you know that." I nodded. "Light is good," I said. "Respect is better." He uncrossed his arms, crossed them again. "This is going nowhere." "It's going somewhere you don't like," I said gently. "That's not the same." He took a small step toward the bed, seized the shawl with 2 fingers before thinking, then set it back quickly when he realized what he had touched. "We're not trying to hurt you, Dad," he said. "We're trying to be practical. You don't need all this space. You're one person." "I am," I said. "So is a baby. And yet, here we are, measuring floors to decide who deserves a window." He rubbed his forehead. "You always twist things." "I untwist them," I said. "I take the knot and make it visible." He exhaled, frustration muddling with something like shame. "If this is about money, say it. If you want me to pay more for groceries or bills, just say it. Don't—" He waved at the room. "Do this." "It's about value," I said, "which you spell differently but mix up often. It's about who made this place and how it is kept." He rolled his eyes again, but they didn't roll far. "We keep it," he said. "We clean, we cook, we pay utilities, we live here." I let a small smile appear. "You live here," I said. "Do you know what that means?" He stared. "Dad." "It means you are inside something," I said. "It does not automatically mean it is yours." He went quiet. The house liked the silence. It pressed around us like a listening friend. Then he threw the line down between us like a rope. "This is our home." "Whose?" I asked. "Mine and Lena's, and yours." As a family, I took a step toward the wardrobe. "Family is not a title deed," I said softly. It's a promise. And some promises are paper too. His eyes flashed. Are you threatening me? To throw us out? Over a room? It was the first time fear entered his voice properly. The proud mask shifted and I saw my son underneath, real, unarmored, worried. I shook my head. No, I said, I'm trying to teach you where walls stand, so you don't walk into them in the dark and break your face. He stared at me, and his jaw loosened. We already told people we're moving things on Saturday, he mumbled, almost like a child admitting he'd lied about homework. I told them we're setting up the nursery. Who is them? I asked. Our friends, her parents. I sent pictures of the room. I told them it was already decided. The admission hung between us like damp cloth. There it was, not logic, not light, not bathrooms. Pride, an audience you have to keep feeding. He looked at me as if I might be kind enough to help him keep the show going. I won't embarrass you, I said. His shoulders dropped an inch. Relief flickered. But I won't be made small, I added, and the relief died quickly. His eyes hardened again. So what then? You want an apology? Fine. I'm sorry I brought them to the door. I shouldn't have. But the rest stands. We need the room. That's not changing. He'd practiced that last sentence in his head. It came out smooth and stubborn. He was staking his flag even as the wind tried to tear it away. I nodded slowly as if tasting a stew before adding salt. All right, I said. Then you can listen while I speak. I did, not raise my voice. I told him the story of the roof, of the first night in this house when it rained through the old tiles like a sieve, and his mother stood under a bucket and laughed every time it filled, and I carried it to the sink like a clumsy waiter. I told him about the double shifts, about the morning we had to choose between fixing the wiring or paying the school fee, and I chose both by selling the car I had saved 6 years to buy. I told him how I installed these shelves in this wardrobe with my hands because the carpenter wanted too much, and because I liked the ache that comes from building a thing that will hold what you love. He didn't roll his eyes during that part. His face softened, and he kept opening his mouth and closing it, as if words were stones he didn't want to drop. Dad, he started once, and then stopped. I went on until the room was full of the truth that lives behind paint and plaster. When I finished, I said, You have never paid for this roof. That was not asked of you. You are loved. That is why you are here. But love is not something you use to push a man out of his own bed. He let his arms fall, palms open. We're not pushing you out of the house, he said, softer now. Just out of this room. This is the house, I said, and tapped the floor with my toe. Not just walls, the promise inside them. He swallowed. Then, what do you want me to do? The question came out honest, like a boy who finally asks how to tie the knot he has been pretending he knows. I could have told him then to ask with respect, and I might have given him the room by my own choice, or shared it, or found some softer path. Maybe. But I remembered the hallway laughter. I remembered how he lifted his chin and pointed like a landlord at his tenant. I remembered the small, careless way he touched the shawl. I felt the plan settle into my bones fully, as calm as winter coming. First, I said, you will go out and tell your friends to go home. Not because I order it, but because you understand you invited them into a disrespect. Second, you will call Lena in and we will speak together. And third, you will stop saying our home like it is a magic spell that turns wrong into right. He hesitated. If I do those things, are you going to give us the room? I looked at the wardrobe. The wood glowed in the late afternoon. All that good light, he said, was for the baby now setting gold on the place where the truth waited. I am going to show you something, I said. And then we will not need to argue. He didn't like that. He didn't like not knowing. Show me what, he said, sharp again. A bill? A list of what I owe you? Fine. Do it. I'll pay. He said it like a dare. The pride had crept back up the stairs and was trying to squeeze itself into his throat again. I tilted my head, considering him the way a carpenter looks at a plank to see where it will bend and where it will break. You cannot pay me for nights, I said. For worry, for the smell of disinfectant on my hands after the clinic when you were sick. That's not a debt, that's love. I don't collect that. He flinched like I'd touched a bruise. Then what is this show? He said, pushing the word to hurt me the way the hallway had tried. You've been hinting since earlier. What are you going to do, Dad? I crossed the room to the wardrobe. My hand remembered the path without looking. I slid my fingers along the inner panel, found the flush edge, pushed lightly, and the wood gave with a soft sigh. The hidden seam revealed itself. Ethan's breath hitched. "What is that?" he said, taking an involuntary step forward. The mask slipped. Curiosity is the child in every man, and it arrives without armor. I pressed the hidden catch, and the small compartment eased open an inch, the line of shadow inside thin and waiting. I did not look at him yet. I looked at the panel the way a priest might look at a door before a blessing, quiet and sure. Behind the panel, the safe sat as it always had, quiet, patient, heavy as sense. I pressed my palm flat to its metal face and felt the cool steadiness come up through my skin like clarity. The numbers of the code were not something I had to fetch. They lived in my fingers. I began to turn the dial slowly, the way you wind a watch you trust. He hovered, the words on his tongue tangled. "Dad, what are you—" he started, but his voice fell off as the first number clicked into place, a small sound like a bead snapping on a string. The room changed with that click. The air tightened. Even the dust in the sunlight felt like it was listening. I turned to the second number, the day he cried his first cry and made me into a father so suddenly I forgot fear. The dial settled again with that same soft insistence. He swallowed loudly, a boy at the principal's door. "You had a safe," he whispered. "Here, all this time." "All this time," I said. He stood close enough now that I could smell the hair gel he used, sharp and too clean, the kind of scent that tries very hard to be a man. "What's inside?" he asked, the curiosity fighting the pride, winning. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I did not answer the first question because the best answers arrive without being named. I answered the second. "Because you did not need it," I said, "because strength is quiet until it must speak." His eyes darted to the door and back. "Lena should be here," he murmured, suddenly practical again, as if sharing the moment would dilute its power. "She will be," I said, and set the last number. The lock listened to my memory, then clicked. Not loud, not dramatic, just a decisive sound, like a gavel wrapped in cloth. I let my hand rest on the handle for a breath longer, not to be theatrical, but to remind myself I was not doing this in anger. I was doing this because the house needed to know its own name again. Ethan's face was pale now, the bravado washed out. The boy in him had finally pushed the man aside and was peering past him, wanting to know where we kept the truth all this time. The handle was smooth under my palm, warmed by my skin. I pulled the door open, and the cool air inside rushed out in a short, clean sigh, as if the safe itself had been waiting to speak, and had decided, at last, it was time. Inside the safe, the air felt different, cooler, like the inside of a church on a hot day. I didn't rush. I took out a thick brown envelope tied with a faded blue ribbon, her ribbon, from the sewing box, and set it on the bed where the light spilled. There were other things inside, small and heavy. A wristwatch that used to be my father's, a ring I had never worn because my hands got thicker with work, a stack of passbooks, an old key that didn't open anything anymore but memory. I took only the envelope and closed the safe door halfway, not to hide it, but to tell time we were not done here yet. Ethan watched my hands as if they were strangers. His voice came out smaller than before. "What is it?" I slid the ribbon free and kept it in my palm, a soft line, then I opened the flap. The paper inside had that good dry smell of ink and weight. I did not look at him when I began to speak. I spoke to the room, to the wood, to the woman who had laughed under a leaking roof and still called it a home. "Go call Lena," I said, my voice flat enough to steady the floor. "And bring your friends, all of them. If they were invited to be here when you told me to pack, they can be here when we speak truth." He flinched. "Dad, that's not necessary." "It is," I said, and looked up. My eyes must have told him the rest. He opened the door and stood in the hallway, swallowing. I heard him say, not as loud as before, "Can you come, please?" The word please sounded new in his mouth. Shoes scuffed, laughter died. They shuffled in, trying to pretend they didn't know what was happening. Lena came last, wiping her hands on a napkin, her face careful. She stood beside Ethan, her fingers finding his sleeve like a child looking for a railing. I did not make a speech. I picked up the top document and turned it so it faced them. Then I held it with both hands the way a man holds a baby, Steady, sure, not showing off. Do you know what this is? I asked. No one answered. The chain boy leaned, then straightened like a soldier. Lena tilted her head to read upside down, and Ethan's eyes darted over the words like minnows. It's the deed, he said, and tried to make his voice bored. It came out thin. I nodded. It is the deed. It has another name. Title, ownership. The paper you would need if you wanted to say our home, as if paper made it true. I let the silence sit with them. Then I placed my finger on the line where a name was printed in black letters that never learned to lie. Read it, I said. Ethan's mouth moved as he read the letters that have been my name longer than he has been a man. He blinked as if he'd caught dust. His voice didn't come. The chain boy breathed out through his nose. Lena's eyes moved carefully over the page, then darted to Ethan's face and back. The deed did not lift its shoulders or clear its throat. It sat there, patient, final. Whose name is on it? I asked. He swallowed. Yours, he said. He added quick, hopeful, for now. I allowed myself a small, slow smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes because it doesn't need to. For as long as I live, I said, and longer if I choose. That made him look at me sharply. What do you mean? I slid the deed back into the envelope and took out the next paper. This, I said, is a life estate. The word sounded too big in the room, so I made it smaller. It means the house is mine to live in until I die. No one can make me leave, not a bank, not a son, not good intentions with poor manners. After I die, what happens is written here, too. I tapped the second page. Which is, Ethan said, his voice trying to be strong and coming out like paper being folded. I let my finger rest on a paragraph with a neat stamp. It passes to a trust, I said softly. A trust with conditions. The chain boy shifted his weight. One of the others, the quiet one, looked at me like he was watching a movie where he already knew the ending but wanted to see every scene. Lena's third finger tightened around the napkin she still held. What conditions? She asked, careful. That it houses family, I said. Family who keeps the house's name clean. Family who lives with respect. Family who understands that a room is not just a room if the people inside it are not safe. I wrote those words when your mother died, Ethan. My voice didn't tremble when I said her name. It laid it down like a stone, solid and warm. I wrote them because grief can make people greedy, and I wanted to guard our love when I would be too tired to guard it myself. He looked as if I had spoken a language he used to know, but hadn't heard in years. You made a trust, he said, turning the word over like a coin he suspected might be counterfeit. For this house. For this family, I corrected. The house is just the shape of it. He tried one more route. Pride does not leave easily. It sips water and tries to stand again. So what? He said, aiming for nonchalant and hitting shaky. So you can kick us out if you feel like it? Lena whispered. Ethan, warning him with his own name the way I had earlier. I shook my head. So I can keep us in, I said, together, safe, with rules that keep us from becoming strangers who share walls. I turned to the page that held the signature of the lawyer who had stamped our grief into protection. You told me to pack my things, I said, in front of an audience. You told me this room was better used by a baby than by the man who built the roof. And you did it with a smile you borrowed from people who do not pay the light bill. Today you learn that this house is not an opinion, it is a promise, and that promise carries my name. No one laughed. The music in the lounge had finally given up and gone quiet on its own. Outside, a bird called once, then thought better of it. The chain boy, who had been the loudest earlier, took a small step back and found the doorframe with his shoulder. He looked like he wanted the wood to swallow him. The quiet friend cleared his throat and said, to no one in particular, we should maybe wait outside. But the door did not move. The air seemed to have settled into a new shape, one where my son was not the tallest thing in the room anymore. Ethan's face had gone pale in that way faces do, when the heat you carried was only bravado. He opened his mouth and found nothing waiting. He closed it again. Then he tried a different thing, a thing boys do when they have been caught but haven't decided whether to be sorry. He laughed, just once, short and strange, like a hiccup. Dad, he said, spreading his hands. Why keep all this secret? Why not tell me earlier? Why make it a show? He wanted to turn it back on me. Old trick. I didn't take it. Because you did not need it earlier, I said. Because you needed love more than leverage. Because a father's power should be a blanket, not a rope. Because I wanted your manhood to come from your choices, not from my paper. I looked around at the faces I had fed when they were boys. And because you brought a crowd to my door and made a lesson necessary. He swallowed again, hard. The pride that had looked so sure in the hallway was leaking out of him like air from a punctured ball. He looked smaller, or maybe I was finally standing at my full height. So what happens now? He asked, and the words were simple, clean. No bravado, no show. I did not answer right away. I reached into the envelope and took out one more thing. A sealed letter, yellowed at the edges, the flap closed with the same blue ribbon. On the front, in her handwriting that even the years couldn't teach to behave, were 4 words, for Ethan, when ready. His breath snagged. He reached for it and then stopped, his fingers curling back like he had touched an ember. Is that, he began and couldn't finish. Your mother wrote it, I said. A week after the doctor used the word we both pretended not to hear. She gave it to me to keep. For when he is a man, she said. I asked, how will I know? She said, you will know. I held the letter up in the light and then set it on the bed beside the deed, as if introducing 2 old friends. Lena's hand found her mouth. The boys, so loud an hour ago, looked as if their chairs had been taken away, and they didn't know where to put their hands. Ethan stared at the letter, like it might run. Can I? He whispered. Not yet, I said gently. A man reads a letter like that when his knees are not knocking from embarrassment. He reads it when he is ready to listen to his mother without trying to argue with her ghost. His eyes filled, fast and ashamed, and he blinked hard to push the water away where men think tears shouldn't be seen. I pretended not to notice. I returned the deed and the life estate to the envelope and left the letter on the bed, a small son. Then I turned to his friends, and my voice was polite in the way politeness can be a line drawn in chalk. Boys, I said, nodding to each in turn, thank you for coming to celebrate new life in this house. Now I ask you to leave us for a while, so the house can learn your names again without this noise around them. The chain boy nodded, eyes on the floor. Uncle, he said, and the word came back to him like a coat he hadn't worn in a long time. The quiet one murmured, congratulations, and meant it, and placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder before he slipped out. The hallway swallowed their footsteps one by one, and as the last one left, the lounge music started to play again by itself, and then stopped, as if it had changed its mind. We were 3 in the room, a father, a son, a woman brave enough to stand between love and pride and try to keep them both fed. Lena spoke first, and I liked her more for it. I'm sorry, she said. No excuses, no frosting, just the words. I should have stopped them in the hallway. I told them we should talk privately. I should have insisted. I inclined my head. Thank you, I said. That matters. Ethan stood rigid, his jaw working, his eyes glassy with thoughts he had never had to think before. What do you want me to do? He asked again, but this time it sounded like a man asking for directions after he has finally admitted he is lost. Start by naming what you did, I said. Not just to me, but to yourself. Say it plain, then we can build from there. He stared at the floor, the old boards that had learned our footsteps. When he spoke, his voice was rough. I humiliated you, he said. I made you small in your own house. I brought people to watch. He swallowed. I did it because I wanted to look big, because I told people already, because I thought the house was mine just because I live here, because I confused living with owning, because I thought fatherhood meant taking, not building. He stopped and dragged a hand across his face. The words had taken work. Work is good. It puts blood back into you. I nodded once. Good, I said. Now try again. This time say, I did it because I was proud. He closed his eyes. I did it because I was proud. The sentence landed true. Lena's hand left his sleeve and slipped into his palm. He squeezed it like a child and then let go, standing on his own feet. Next, I said, you will fix it. He looked up, alarmed. How? You will walk to that lounge, I said, and you will tell your friends that what happened at my door was wrong. You will speak my name with respect in front of them because you dropped it in front of them. You will call her parents and tell them the same. and you will tell them that you will be building your nursery in your room for now, with your hands, with your money, with your patience. If, later, you ask me like a man to help you, I will. I may even offer this room by my own choice when I see that the house's name is safe in your mouth. But you will not take it. Not today. He stared at me as if the floor had tilted. Build it in our room, he repeated, but it's so small. Then you will learn how to move gently, I said. Babies teach that. He blew out a breath he had been holding since the hallway. Okay, he said. The word was quiet and honest. Then, because pride is a stubborn tenant, he added, people will talk. I shrugged. Let them, give them something new to talk about. Let them say they saw a man learn something. He gave a short, helpless laugh that had more relief than humor in it. You're impossible, he said. No, I said. I'm a father. Lena exhaled and her shoulders dropped. She looked suddenly tired in the way happy women get tired when happiness has to be defended. We'll start tonight, she said. After everyone leaves, we'll clear the space. We'll paint next week. She met my eye. We'll keep our voices low. We won't be loud in the hall at night. We won't make the house flinch. I felt something inside me unclench. A small knot loosening the way an old shoe finally gives and fits your foot. Thank you, I said. And I will help where help is asked, not where it is commanded. Ethan moved closer to the bed, to the letter lying there like a small, quiet bird. He didn't touch it. He bowed his head over it and said, very softly, I don't feel ready. Then don't read it now, I said. Read it when you are building something with your hands and you need her laugh to oil your bones. Read it when the baby is crying and you think you cannot do another hour, and then you do. Read it when you're proud for the right reason. He nodded, his throat working again. He looked at the wardrobe and then at me. How did you build the compartment? He asked. With patience, I said, and a pencil. Every good thing starts with a mark and gets finished with time. He smiled without meaning to. It looked good on him, like a shirt that actually fits. He turned toward the door. I'll tell them now, he said, and then I'll come back. Come back with Lena, I said. We'll have tea. We'll talk about paint. I pressed the safe door until it clicked shut with that small, serious sound. He opened the room door and paused on the threshold. He looked back at me and his mouth moved as if he were searching for a word that wasn't sorry or thanks or excuse. He found a different one. Dad, he said. Just that. But the way he said it filled the room. He left. The hallway took him. I could hear his footsteps in the lounge, then his voice, low but clear, and the shape of the silence that followed told me the celebration had finally understood it was not only about cake. There is a special kind of quiet that happens when pride evaporates. It leaves a dampness you can feel but not wipe away. And then, if you are lucky, the air smells cleaner than before. Lena stayed with me, standing by the bed, looking at the letter. She had beautiful handwriting, she said. She did everything beautifully, I said, and heard myself sound like a man who finally allows the truth to make him soft. We stood there for a long breath, two people listening for the sound of a house learning its name again. Then Lena said, I can make tea, and went to the kitchen like a daughter who had lived here for years. In the lounge, voices rose and fell. I heard Ethan say my name the way I asked him to say it, not as a wall, but as a bridge. I heard a friend murmur something like apology. I heard doors open and shut. I walked to the window and looked at the bougainvillea, so bright it almost hurt the eye. The plant did not care about trusts or deeds or life estates. It cared about sun and water and time. I felt foolish for a second. All men do. When paper wins a battle love should have won. Then I remembered that paper can be love dressed in ink, and I let the foolishness go. Ethan came back sooner than I expected. He closed the door behind him without a sound and stood straight in the middle of the room. The boy was gone, the man was tired, but he was here. I told them, he said simply. I told them I was wrong. He drew a breath. I called her parents. I told them too. He searched my face for a verdict and found none. Good, I said. Now, go wash your hands. Paint will come off skin easier if you start with clean. He frowned, then smiled because he knew I was not actually talking about paint. He went to wash. I sat on the bed and picked up the blue ribbon, rolling it between my fingers, thinking of the first time I tied a bow with those small, clumsy hands, my wife laughing at the mess I made. Lena returned with tea, 3 cups on a tray, steam lifting in a patient line. We sat, We drank. We didn't talk about the safe. We talked about green paint and how many shelves a baby actually needs compared to how many the internet says you should buy. We talked about night feeds and the sound a child's breath makes when his fever finally breaks. We talked like people who live in the same house talk when a storm has passed and left everything clearer, even the windows. Later, Ethan took the letter, not to open it, but to hold it. He slid it back under the ribbon and said, "I will read it when we set the first screw." I nodded. She would like that. She loved the sound of a screwdriver. He laughed, and a little of the boy came back in a good way. He looked around the room one more time, not measuring where to put a crib, but seeing the bed, the lamp, the shawl, the marks on the door, as if they were a story he had hurried past before. He touched the wardrobe lightly, the way a man touches a far door in a familiar house to remind himself it's still there. "I was wrong," he said again, tasting the words. "Yes," I said, "and now you can be right." He nodded, looked at the letter one last time, then opened the door and called into the hallway, his voice warm and steady. "Lena, bring the tape. We'll measure our room." The house listened and settled. The celebration was not over. It had just changed shape. That night the house breathed differently, like a tired runner who finally found his pace. The lounge still smelled faintly of frosting and candles, but the laughter that had echoed off the walls earlier had settled into the cushions, softer, humble. Ethan and Lena stood in the doorway of their room with a tape measure and a pencil behind the ear. His mother used to do that, while I brought in a small toolbox that had lived under my bed longer than some friendships last. Outside, the bougainvillea folded its color into the dusk, and the street dogs barked at nothing worth worrying about. I set the toolbox down and clicked it open. The sound was ordinary and perfect. It told the house, "We're building, not breaking." "Start from the corner," I said, and handed him the tape. His hand brushed mine, and he didn't snatch it away like boys do when they want to pretend they are already men. He took it carefully, like a man who has learned that care is stronger than show. We measured the wall where the crib would go, and then the space under the window that caught morning light. "If you put the dresser here," I said, tapping the plaster with my knuckle, "you won't block the breeze. Babies sleep better when the air remembers to visit." He grinned, surprised to learn something simple. "The internet never said that." "The internet doesn't know this house," I said, and marked a tiny X where a bracket would anchor. He watched me draw the mark and then made his own, a little shaky but proud of the line. Lena kept notes on a small pad, her handwriting neat and kind, adding tiny boxes next to each task like she wanted to give the work a place to sit. We pulled the rug aside, found a sticky patch where Juice had fought the floor and lost, and laughed together in the way people laugh after a storm when the sky looks like it might behave. When we opened the flat box with the crib pieces, screws rolled like silver seeds across the floor. Ethan knelt to gather them, and I saw the man he will be when he is 60 if he keeps choosing this kind of night, a man whose knees are sore and heart is soft. "You can read the instructions," he said, holding the folded paper like a fragile map. I shook my head. "You read," I told him. "A father's job is not to be the only one who knows. It's to make sure the next one learns." He took a breath and started, stumbling over a phrase about threaded dowels and locking cams, then finding the rhythm. We laid the pieces out in a simple grid, and the room felt like a workshop, not a battlefield. And that alone was a miracle. Halfway through the first side of the crib, he paused and glanced at the letter on the dresser, the yellow envelope bright against the wood. "It's time," he said, so softly I almost pretended not to hear. I nodded and kept my hand steady. He wiped his palms on his jeans and reached for the ribbon, the same blue ribbon that had tied our deed, our safety, our promise. The bow gave easily. His mother always tied bows that knew when to let go. He slid a finger under the flap and opened it slow, as if rushing would turn the words shy. He didn't sit. He stood the way people stand when a truth they've avoided finally taps their shoulder. Lena came to his side, her shoulder touching his arm, ready to hold him up if his legs forgot. He unfolded the paper, and the first line made his mouth tremble. He cleared his throat and read aloud. Not for me, not for the baby, not even for Lena, but for the woman whose voice rose with his from the page. "My brave boy," he read, and closed his eyes a second because her handwriting made the words sound like her. "If you are reading this, then your father believed you were ready to hear me without seeing me. Good. You hated lectures when you were small, but you listened to stories. So, here is one. He swallowed and went on, the room soaking in each sentence. When you were 4, you wanted the big chair at the table. You climbed and huffed and made a lot of noise. Your father waited and then lifted you into it. Do you know what you did? You looked at him and announced that the big chair was yours now, and he could have the small one forever. I laughed. He smiled. He moved to the small one. After dinner, you asked him to carry you to bed because the big chair made you tired. He did. Pride is like that chair. It makes you feel tall and then it makes you heavy. Choose love instead. It will not make you taller, but it will make you lighter. Ethan's voice thickened on lighter. He breathed and kept reading. If you are a husband now, be kind to your wife when no one is watching. If you are a father now, be gentle with your child when everyone is watching. If you are a son now, remember your father's hands. The house you live in is proof that his hands knew how to love you when you didn't see them. When you think a room will make you a better man, think again. A room does not make a man. A man makes a room safe. He stopped there, a sound caught between laugh and sob. He pressed the paper to his chest for a second, like a man saving a photograph from rain. I did not touch him. I let the words do what they came to do. Then he read the last lines, quiet, clear. When you stand in front of your father with a demand, turn it into a request. And when you stand in front of your child with a request, turn it into an example. I love you. Make me proud in the way that keeps you kind. He folded the letter slowly and left his palm on it, as if heat could keep ink alive. She always knew how to say things, he whispered. She still does, I said. She just borrowed your voice for it. He nodded and put the letter back into its envelope, tying the ribbon wrong once, then right, and storing it in the top drawer. He didn't announce anything heroic after that. He went back to the crib with a new face, the kind of face a man wears when he is finally in conversation with himself. We tightened the frame, worked the cams into place, tapped the dowels home with the heel of my hand. Screwdriver, I said. He passed it before I finished the word. Level, I said. He held it up to the bar and squinted, then smiled when the bubble hovered in the center like a promise kept. Good, I said. The baby will sleep straight. While the screws threaded their way into wood, Lena chose paint. 2 coats will do it, she said, and showed us a quiet green that didn't shout at the eyes. Your mother would like this, I told Ethan. She loved colors that behaved. He laughed, the kind of laugh that doesn't need an audience, just a good reason. We moved the bed to the wall, tested squeaks, slipped folded cardboard under a leg that wobbled. We talked about the rug and where a night lamp would go and whether the curtains should be shorter to leave room for small hands to pull and learn. He asked questions in the unembarrassed way men ask. When they finally accept, they don't lose height by learning. I answered in the unblaming way a father answers when he remembers how often he needed the same. Around midnight, the house sighed. You can hear it if you've lived with a place long enough, a small settling sound when the hot day leaves and the cool returns, the wood changing its mind about pressure. We took a tea break on the floor, backs against the now steady bed, cups warm in our hands. I called your friends again, Ethan said, eyes on the steam. I told them not to joke about you when I'm not around. I told them this house has rules. I did not clap. I nodded. Good. Men have friends who keep them brave, not performative. He smirked. Performative, he repeated, and rolled the word around like a marble he wanted to pocket. You're serious. Serious enough to sleep, I said. And we all laughed because the night had bent and didn't break. In the morning, my phone buzzed too early with a number I had seen only on holidays, Lena's mother. I answered because I am old enough to know dodging a call only makes it run faster. Assalam, alaikum, she said, voice tight, polite the way a rope is taut before a pull. We heard there was a discussion. Wa alaikum assalam, I said. There was a short class. Your son-in-law passed. Silence, then a chuckle she could not swallow. He told us, she said finally, and her voice softened. We should have taught him better. We should have told him the difference between comfort and entitlement. He will teach your grandchild now, I said. That is how families improve. We ended the call as allies, not rivals. When I told Ethan, he exhaled like he had been bracing for a blow and got a handshake instead. By noon, the second coat was drying, the crib waited like a small boat ready for a calm sea, and Lena stood with her palms on her belly, swaying, the way women do when a body inside hears hammers and decides to dance. I went to the kitchen and cooked what I cook when something important has been built. Simple rice and lentils with a tempering of garlic and chilies. The smell filled the hallway and made the paint smell like it belonged to the family of scents. We ate at the table where the big chair once taught a 4-year-old that height is not the same as worth. Ethan glanced at the master bedroom door once, then looked deliberately away. "We'll keep this room," he said, nodding to his own. "We'll make it worthy." "You'll make yourselves worthy," I corrected. "The room will follow." For days we worked small miracles that do not look like miracles on camera. We installed a shelf low enough for little hands to reach books with animals who never learned to wear trousers. We sanded the edge of a drawer that stuck because wood ages like men. Brave, but occasionally stubborn. We oiled the door hinges so the baby could sleep through entrances and exits. I stitched a small tear in the old rug with thread from the tin in my study and told Lena that your mother believed nothing with stitches should be thrown away. Ethan brought home a second-hand rocking chair someone had left on a curb, and we sanded its arms smooth, history turning into new. We learned each other's patience in those days, and in learning patience, we started speaking the same language again. Sometimes pride came back at the edges like a stray cat, meowing to be fed. It happened when a friend sent a message in the boys' group. "Bro, you let Unc punk you like that?" What a word to use about a man who ironed your shirt for Eid when your own father was late. Ethan looked at the message for a long second and then typed slowly, "I let my father teach me. You should try it." He turned his phone over and went back to the crib, tightening a loose screw without needing my hand to guide his. It happened when he saw the way people in the neighborhood looked toward our windows, their curiosity stuck to the glass. He wanted to wave a deed in their faces the way I had laid it down in front of him. Instead, he waved at a neighbor, who just had his first grandchild, called out congratulations, and asked earnestly about sleep schedules. Pride, ignored, wandered off to find a different porch. One evening, the three of us sat in the study, the small one, and turned it into my workshop again. Ethan brought a small safe of his own, the kind that looks like it guards treasure and really holds important papers and a photograph of a laugh, and asked where to hide it. "Don't hide it," I said. "Teach your child what is inside. Teach the difference between secrets and safekeeping." He looked at me like I was smarter than I am, and then put the safe plainly on a shelf, not as a display, but not as a ghost either. He slid the letter into it. He placed a blank notebook next to it and wrote on the first page, in his awkward but getting better hand, "Things worth knowing." Under that, he wrote, 1. Ask with respect. 2. Build with your hands. 3. Love like you are being watched by the person you want to be. He capped his pen like closing a door properly and looked at me without saying, "Is that good?" I said, "It is a start." The day the crib was finished and the paint dry, the late afternoon sun entered their room like it had been invited for a proper visit. It touched the rails, climbed the wall, rested on the rocking chair, and turned the green to a kind of quiet joy. Ethan slid his hand over the smooth wood and then reached for the envelope in the safe for the second time. "I want to read one line out loud," he said, and I nodded because some lines are supposed to build a room with sound. He opened the letter carefully, his finger tracing the loop in her handwriting, and read, "When you think a room will make you a better man, think again." He smiled at the echo and folded the paper back. Then he looked at me and said with a steady voice that fit him, "Thank you for not yelling. Thank you for not pretending," I said. "Pretending is just lying in polite shoes." We went back to my room then, because the last thing a house needs after it learns its name is the sound of doors closing without goodbye. I opened the hidden panel, not to show him the deed again, but to put away the envelope the way you put away winter clothes when the weather finally softens. He stood beside me and watched the dial spin to its numbers like a child watching a seasoned cook measure salt by feel. "Will I ever have my name on that paper?" he asked, not with hunger, but with hope. "Maybe," I said, "when your child can stand in a hallway and call my name with respect when I'm tired." He smiled, the idea fitting him. "That's fair. Fair is a room you keep swept even when guests aren't coming," I said. He laughed because he could hear his mother's voice in mine when I said it. I kept my room. They kept theirs. And yet the house moved closer around us, the walls listening not for victory, but for softness. I started leaving my door open a little in the evening so the smell of their dinner and the sound of their television could leak into my quiet, They started knocking before they came in, not because I demanded it, but because they wanted to. On Sundays, Ethan boiled tea in the old kettle and called it his, even though its handle burned fingers if you grabbed it wrong. And I didn't correct him, because a man should feel ownership over the things he is willing to be burned by. Lena began to borrow spices from my shelf and return them with small glass jars she had labeled in a smart, balanced script that made me proud of the people my wife would have chosen to love. Weeks later, the boys from the hallway came again, this time without swagger, with a paint roller and a bag of screws as peace offerings. They said uncle without stumbling and asked if they could help build shelves in the lounge. I said yes and handed them the tape measure with the same seriousness I had given my son. We worked and laughed, and nobody filmed it because some lessons deserve privacy. When they left, they shook my hand with both of theirs and promised to visit without laughter that hurt. I believed them. Not because boys don't fail, but because houses remember who tries. If you're still with me, if you followed this story from the knockless door to the soft click of a safe closing, then you know the truth that matters. I didn't win by shouting. I didn't win by throwing him out. I won by making the house remember itself, by using paper not to threaten, but to teach, by letting a woman who isn't here speak through the letter she left like a light in a jar. Ethan didn't lose by saying sorry. He built a room with it. His pride didn't vanish into a hole. It evaporated into air we can all breathe. And the baby we haven't met yet already has the biggest room in the house, made of respect, lined with patience, lit by the kind of daylight that arrives when men put down their flags and pick up a screwdriver. If this reached you, if you felt the click of that lock, or the warmth of that tea, or the weight of that letter, tell me where you're watching from. Like this, if it reminded you of someone you love, share it with someone who needs to hear a voice that doesn't shout to be strong. Drop a comment with the moment that hit you hardest. And subscribe if you want more stories where the twist isn't cruelty but courage, where justice is quiet and still thunders through the walls.